Guys, I'm really excited about today's podcast guest, Jamal Jivanjee, and he comes from Southern California, and he's going to talk to us all about. He's an author, he's a life coach, and he helps people become liberated, empowered. We're going to talk about leadership, difference between pain and suffering, living, alignment. It's going to be a fantastic conversation about, culture, values, living in alignment with yourself. And I'm happy to welcome Jamal to the show. Welcome, Jamal.
Thank you, Christopher. Is it okay to call you Christopher? Is that good?
Call me Chris, very informal.
Chris. Gotcha. Chris, it's I've actually been looking forward to this conversation for a while. So thank you for having me. I feel very honored to be on your show.
And I know you have a podcast as well, Lovecast, and talk about, your journey and how you got to be doing what you're doing.
Yeah, so I'm a life coach by profession. It's been a long journey. I would have never, some people know up front, long, in their youth, they know what they want to do. I had no idea what I wanted to do. And it took me down a lot of different roads, all of which I have took me a long time to see this,
Mhm.
but all the roads I've been down have led me to this moment and led me to this season of my life where I'm doing what I'm doing. And I can honestly say I don't really work. My wife and I, we have this kind of little joke between us, but she'll like say, "Do you have to work today?" And I always correct her. I always say, "I don't work." But I know what you mean. I understand the question. I have some calls scheduled for today, but it's not working. And the reason I say that, it's not just semantics for me. It's because of the way I grew up. Work meant doing something you don't want to do for money. So it's taken a long time for me to get to a place where what I'm doing is really what fulfills me. It is very meaningful. So I'm a life coach by profession. I would have never chosen that path for myself, but yet it's the path I feel like life has chosen for me, and all the experiences and the jobs and different things I've done along the way has really prepared me for this. So that's a
Yeah.
bit about myself.
What I love about your statement is everything has prepared you for what you're doing now. And, a lot of times I ruminate and I'm like, well, if this didn't happen, then, I'd be, all this like. One question is, what is, because you're a life coach and,
Mhm.
a lot of people are in pain or in suffering. What is,
Mhm.
what is the difference and how do you
Mhm.
settle that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for many years, I didn't realize that there was a difference. I kind of equated pain and suffering as just being the same thing. I used them synonymously with each other. And I thought I had this belief, right? And a belief is, which we can talk more about, but a belief is simply a repetitive thought, something we've been taught over time that we you think about something enough, it becomes a belief at the level of your unconscious or subconscious mind. So I had this belief that life was hard. This is kind of the message that was delivered to me, from my own story, my own,
Mm.
growing up and parents. And so the belief was life's hard and life is full of suffering.
Mhm.
And there seemingly was a lot of evidence for that. But it took me a long time to realize that actually pain and suffering are very different things. So, very simplistic, and this is probably a little bit too simple of an analogy, but a very simplistic analogy that kind of I like to use to distinguish the difference is like, so take, for example, let's just say you were walking across a floor in the middle of the night. You had to get up to use a restroom or something, and you're walking across the floor, and maybe you like to exercise. So you have these dumbbells, these free weights that you like to use. Let's say you place one on the floor and you forgot that you placed it on the floor. And so in the middle of the night, as you're walking to the restroom, you stub your toe on this free weight, which has happened to me. Right? It's extremely painful, right? I
Mhm.
mean, it's a physiological thing, right? You have this initial jolt of pain. And actually, I've heard some studies that show for about 90 seconds, you lose consciousness of everything in life. You lose consciousness of your life, what's happening around you. All you can focus on is this painful event that's happening at the toe. My big toe is throbbing and the world is over, as I know it. Now, after about 90 seconds, 120 seconds, especially if you hit it hard, maybe it's a little longer. But eventually, the thing with pain is it's like a wave. It comes, it crests, it dissipates. And as it dissipates, you're back to life. You're like, okay, it's not so bad, right? Like I will live, I will survive. And then I remember that's pain. That's the nature of pain.
Mhm.
Life, I will say this about life. Life is there painful events are part of life. They're often things that are a little bit beyond our control. They happen, they cause a reaction. They hurt.
Mhm.
This is not suffering, however. Now, suffering, so let's use the same analogy, right? I walk across the floor, I stub my toe, it hurts, so I'm experiencing pain. But then about after 90 seconds, the pain subsides. What happens? I get angry. Who left this in the middle of the floor? This is the story of my life. You know what? I live with really inconsiderate people. People don't pick up after themselves. I can't even walk across the floor without hurting myself. I am such a klutz. I'm incompetent. I live with incompetent people. This is the story of my life. You know, there's suffering in that. So
Yeah.
there's a story there. There's a story.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
I've often heard it put this way: pain is the event. It's the effects of an event. The suffering is the story I'm telling about the event. And
Mhm.
this is why pain is very temporary. It doesn't stay. Suffering lingers. It lasts. It actually will last your whole life if you let it, because it's a story.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that's the biggest difference between pain and suffering, in my understanding.
Very profound. It's kind of sounds like kind of reminds me of this definition of failure. Like failure is an event, but you are not a failure. And sounds like
Mhm.
the same thing. Like pain is an event, but suffering is like you can't let go of it. It's like you're just attached to it, and all these stories. Why is there so much suffering in today's? Like, what is the root cause, and why sounds like our society is just suffering more and more and not getting any
Mhm.
better.
That's a great question. Yeah, it's a fantastic question. I actually was recently listening to a podcast episode. It was somebody's podcast, and they were interviewing a couple of people, and I thought it was really profound. With the host asked the guest, he said, "How much money would you need to feel good about your life, to feel free, to feel liberated?" And the guy said, "Well, if I had liquid like cash, accessible cash, about $1 million, I think I feel really good about my life. I wouldn't be stressed at all." He said, "Okay, great." He goes, "What about 10 million? What if you had 10 million?" And the guy said, "Well, even better." And he said, "Okay, well, fantastic. Well, what if I could guarantee for you that I today could actually have $10 million transferred to your checking account, your bank account? What do you say to that?" He's like, "Sign me up. Just tell me what I got to do." He's like, "Okay, there's one caveat though. One caveat." He's like, "What's that?" He said, "You would actually have to spend it all today." He's like, "Okay, I think I could probably do that. That would be challenging, but I think I could probably, I'd rather try to spend it than not." He's like, "Okay, so you have to spend it all day." He's like, "Well, why would I have to spend it all today?" He said, "Well, because you're not going to wake up in the morning, because this is the last day of your life. Do you still want the money?" And the
Mhm.
guy has thought about it. He goes, "Absolutely not." He's like, "Oh, so you don't want the 10 million if today's all you have?"
Yeah.
And he's like, "Well, no." He's like, "What good is money if I don't have a life to go along with it?"
Mhm.
Because the
Mhm.
day goes by really quick. And this guy said, "Oh, that's interesting. So what I'm hearing you say is that just waking up in the morning is worth more than $10 million to you. Like you wouldn't trade it." And he goes, "I actually have never thought about my life like that." He's like, "I know. Why don't you think about your life as being something of infinite value that's worth more than $10 million?" And I think it's a great question. It really caused me to think when I listened to that. I thought, and I was recently speaking in a prison. I was actually last week, I got an opportunity to speak to some inmates in prison, and we were talking about freedom of all places, to talk about freedom, talking about freedom in the prison. And I was talking about this, talking about the same story, and just like, why do we not think, because we're suffering, right? Because we're somewhere we don't want to be, doing something we don't want to be doing. And yet we wouldn't trade waking up in the morning for $10 million, but we don't feel like, can you imagine waking up going, this is worth more than 10 million right now? Like, how
Mhm.
good would our life be? But why do we not feel this way about life?
Mhm.
Because it's the only thing we have that's infinite in value. We would not trade it for $10 million. And yet we're suffering all the time. Why? And
Yeah.
I think my understanding, and this is, a lot of what I've discovered in my own life and also in the work I do as a coach, is because we have a story that's actually distracting us from enormous miracle. And it really is a miracle when you think about it. I wouldn't trade waking up for 10 million. I wouldn't trade my own ability to be alive and to be here and to have this conversation, to be interacting with life. I wouldn't trade it for 10 million. No. Why don't I feel this way? Why don't I feel the magnitude of that
Mm.
story? I got a story. There's a story running subconsciously in the background, and it's telling me things like, I don't have enough this, I don't have enough that, I'm not good enough, I'm not lovable enough, I'm not safe, I'm not free, whatever it may be. And this isn't conscious. Again, this is hard. This story is hard to see. It's I look at it like glasses. Like when you're wearing glasses, you don't see the glasses. You
Mhm.
just see everything through the effects of the lenses that you're looking through, but you don't see the glasses themselves. And this is why we often don't see, we think that our life and our story is the same thing, and they're not. The
Mhm.
story is the glasses we're wearing. And that's why, but because we don't see the glasses, that's why we're suffering. We think life is that way. And it's like, no, that's just the glasses. Life is not that way.
Very profound because the more I study like monks and or if I study billionaires, like some of the monks they have nothing but they're extremely content and they're and then the like a lot of billionaires and people of massive wealth they're very mean to people and they're unhappy and they're trying to like save on taxes and saving their divorce and one thing that I
Mm-hmm.
love is you have this idea of living for a living and then it
Mm-hmm.
goes back to this idea where people basically they're renting out their time for a paycheck. They're trading their time for money as opposed to trading their time for other things. So why, like I know our society is built on that, but how do
Mm-hmm.
we start to shift that frame?
Yeah, that was it's I love the question because well let's go back to that analogy, right? When that podcast, right, where the guy said, would you trade your life for $10 million? And the answer is clear, no. And I don't know anybody, most people would, unless they're really suffering, right? And you went out.
Mhm.
Most people would say, no, I'm not going to take $10 million to not wake up in the morning, right?
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
in some ways, we're doing that, are we not? We do it in installments. We're trained to do it. Like, okay, maybe I don't take all of my life for 10 million and trade it death for 10 million. But we're
Yeah.
kind of doing it with like, I'll give you a day, I'll give you an hour
Yeah.
for $20, $40, $50, whatever, whatever the hourly wage is, right? We kind of do that in installments, thinking, well, there's always more. I'll just trade an hour here, an hour there,
Mhm.
a
Mhm.
year here, here, and a year there. I'll wait till retirement to start living. I'll wait till the weekends, right? Oh, I don't like Monday through Friday, but maybe Saturday, Sunday, I can enjoy my weekend, or maybe the vacation, once a year or twice a year. So we're kind of doing this in installments and wondering why we're suffering. Anytime we trade time, and when we say time, let's just be honest. What is time? It's your life,
Mhm.
right? An hour goes by, that's an hour closer to the grave for all of us. So this is why time is valuable, because it's our life. So whenever we trade our life, we don't really trade time because that's a little abstract. We say trade time for money. You're trading your life for money.
Mhm.
Anytime you trade life for money, whether it's all at once or in installments, there's going to be an inner check somewhere deep inside. It's going to go, I don't like this. And that's because we're not designed to do that.
Mhm.
So we need to find a bigger why. I used to work in a prison. I actually was a corrections officer in my first major job, which, by the way, was such great training. I didn't know that at the time, but at the time, the reason I took the job is because I needed a paycheck.
Yeah.
It paid well. It's a good, stable. They're not going out of business, right? So it's always security, job security. It's a state job. It paid well, good benefits, and I in the family I came from and my background culturally, it was really all about survival. It was like you do whatever you have to do to earn a living and pay your bills because that's really what the focus is. So
Mhm.
the metaphor was so perfect. It was like, wow, you're going to go to prison for 8 hours a day for a paycheck. This is
Mhm.
literally a metaphor, right? Like going to a place that I don't want to go, prison, which becomes a prison. Anywhere you don't want to go that you feel like you have to go becomes your prison for anybody.
Mhm. Yeah. Mhm.
For many people, life is a prison, right? I don't want to do this. I don't want to. So we're trading our life for money. I was literally doing that paycheck. So how do we get out of that? Is the why has to be bigger. And so about 2 years into my experience working in a prison, there was an incident that happened where I thought I was going to lose my life. And
Mm,
I literally thought I was going to die. In the moment, in the middle of this, it was kind of like a little mini disturbance or riot in the cell block I was working in.
mhm,
It was the first time in my life I had come face to face with my mortality because I was young and I felt invincible until that moment. And then I realized like I'm on the line here. If something goes just a little bit differently,
mm,
I'm not coming home tonight. And I felt that. And at that point, the paychecks just changed for me. It did
mhm,
not feel significant. I felt underpaid.
mhm,
And then I had to decide, do I want to continue working here in this prison? If
mhm,
I do, if I stay on here, there has to be another reason. And it can't just be about the paycheck. Now, I didn't just magically find my deeper why, the reason why, but it was the starting point of asking a deeper question. What is it that I'm here to do?
mhm,
What brings me joy and yet is also something that is of service and of value to other people in the world? And that was an important question to start asking. And so I always say, to answer your question, a long way to answer your question is, how do we get out of this trading our life for money? Well, we actually have to find a bigger reason to do what we're doing. And I'm not suggesting that people quit their jobs. A lot of people assume that's what I'm saying. You got to quit your job. No, you actually, the why, if you look close enough at anything you're doing, there's a miracle happening. It's your life. It's happening right now. It's unfolding. But in order to access it, you have to go beyond survival, the survival mindset to really access, what if I'm actually being prepared for something in this moment? What if this job is teaching me something essential about myself, about the world, about what I'm here to do? That's when we start to experience a deeper dimension of even the job we may have in this moment. And
mhm.
that's what started happening for me in the prison. I started to see that this was training for me. I was learning how to regulate my own internal state of being because it's such a high stress environment. I had to learn how to regulate myself to even go to work successfully. And then I had to learn about people and their stories and what motivates people and how to connect with people, people that really had no motivation to listen to you and to do what you wanted them to do. I had to learn to motivate them in a different way.
Yeah,
And this was training. And as soon as I could start to see that, I realized like, this is like a setup for my life. But I tell people all the time, whatever you're doing right now, as much as you may despise it, if you can learn to ask a deeper question, how is this for me? How is this preparing me for my life? A whole new dimension will start to open up for you. And it won't be about survival. You'll start to actually start to live, even in your current situation, which
mm,
will always lead you where you want to go
yeah.
eventually.
Very profound and powerful. And I wish we had more time, but kind of for last closing talk, you've written the Amazon best-selling book, Living for a Living, and tell people how they can find that book and how they can follow you on all your socials, check out your work. Very inspiring content.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, I did read a book called Living for a Living. It's really about a lot of these subjects, about my own journey from survival to empowerment and actually moving from a work life that's working for survival to working for service and love and what all that means. So it's available on Amazon. People probably the best way for people to get a hold of that. I mean, obviously you can go to Amazon and search Living for a Living by Jamal Jivanjee. But my website is jamaljivanjee.com. It's my first and last name. And if people go to that website, my podcast, my book, my coaching information about my coaching work, it's all there. And also my links to social media is also there on the website. So probably the easiest way for people to go and connect with me.
What a fantastic conversation, because I have fellow colleagues, they're starting to pass away in their
Mm,
40s, and it's like, well,
mm.
you spend all this time training and for this big lumps, it was exactly what you're talking about, trading your time either in installments or just in so very impactful, and a lot of the points resonate with the audience. Be sure to give Jamal's socials a like and follow. Check out his books. These will be in the links in the show notes. And with that, thanks so much for coming onto the podcast.
Oh, my pleasure. I really appreciate you having me. Thank you for creating the show and having conversations like this. They're so